What is art?
Art is...
Art is history.
What is art? That's a good question.
This is Art Uncovered,
Art is our collective cultural history.
a weekly podcast that brings you interviews with an eclectic mix of artists and creators.
Art is...
disappointing your parents.
I'm your host, Kimberly. Happy Tuesday, everyone. Thanks for tuning in to this week's episode of Art Uncovered. This week, I was honored to speak with Harlan Crichton, a Maine-based artist who works with photographic processes. Over the course of the conversation, we talk about Harlan's transition from traditional photography to abstract photography and other topics such as storytelling and science fiction. Stay with us. Welcome back, listeners. Thanks again for tuning in to this week's episode of Art Uncovered. This week, I'm so honored to be here with Harlan Crichton. Thanks so much for joining us, Harlan. We've been chatting for probably about a month or so online. It's nice to see your face.
Yeah, definitely. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, of course. So I must say, Harlan, I was very excited to receive this in the mail. So listeners, if you are listening to this episode currently on Spotify or Apple Podcasts or anything like this, I am screening a visual of our conversation on YouTube. So if you just go to YouTube and then search for Art Uncovered Podcast, if you're watching this on YouTube, you probably see that I'm holding up a copy of Harlan's zine, which is titled That Was Fun. And it's pretty big for a zine. Yeah.
Yeah, it kind of is.
What is it, like 12 inches by, I don't know, 10 or something like this?
Yeah, 12 by 9.
Okay. Yeah, it's excellent. So maybe to start the conversation, if you could tell us a little bit about this project, and then eventually we'll get to kind of your interest in zines in general. But yeah, tell me a little bit about That Was Fun.
So about the zine specifically, or?
Yeah. Well, maybe about this project, this specific zine. Yeah.
So this body of work started as sort of grew from a frustration with traditional photography. I did that for a long time, and it just wasn't doing it for me anymore, and I wasn't really having fun with it.
When we say traditional photography, do we mean like portraits, landscapes, representing that which looks like our reality in front of us?
Yeah. I did that for a long time. I just did portraits and some landscape for a long time, since I was like 14. I started taking pictures. And I was curious about what would happen if I shot lasers at film. And
that is so cool.
Yeah, and I was just like, what would that look like? And originally because really you can only buy red, green, and blue lasers, but
wait. Let's pause. So you have like a laser gun that shoots a beam of...
Yeah, well, it's just kind of like a cat toy. It's just
I see.
they're just like that. It's
okay.
Like these little pin looking things.
Yeah. And when you say you shoot it on film, what does this mean? So do you have pictures that were already developed and then, or film that was already developed? Like how?
Yeah. So it started out with me shooting. So originally it was just blank film that I would then shoot lasers onto. It's if I was giving an elevator pitch, it would be complicated to explain because it's not really something that can easily be visualized. But yeah, so I was just doing it on blank film for a while just to see what would happen, and I kind of hit the limit of that, and then I started making pictures of mostly landscapes, but some people and objects and stuff like that. And then before I get them processed, I shoot lasers onto them, shot through crystals and prisms, and I obscure parts of them with magnets or found images or my body.
I'm gonna do a screen share here so that we could take a look at
Yep.
some of these abstracted photographs.
Yeah.
Can you see my screen here?
Mhm.
Okay, perfect. Um, okay, so the first one that we're seeing here, for example, it looks like almost like a vintage photograph based on like
Yeah.
the muted colors, but it looks like some kind of landscape with I don't know if it's like a rear view mirror or something in the
Yeah.
foreground, but then it's like it's blown out, and my assumption based on listening to you speak is that that's where you kind of shine or shone
Yeah.
the lasers on the film.
Yeah. So that sort of object that's on it is actually a like a heart-shaped paperclip that I got on a wedding invitation.
Oh.
And so those streaks going off is the light hitting the metal and then reflecting and
Oh, very cool. Very
doing
cool.
those things. Yeah, this first image is actually in the
Let me go back.
is in the zine.
Yeah, let me see if I could actually find it on here. Me too. Okay, so I'm gonna search for this image. Ah, this one here. It's a double page spread.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
very cool.
This most of pretty much all the images from that zine are from a road trip I did to Texas and New Mexico about this time last year.
Mm.
Um, and you know, this actually relates to like the beginnings of this body of work, like conceptually. The original plan for this road trip was to go to Texas, meet some friends, go to Big Bend, and then drive all the way to North Dakota. Because in North Dakota, um, there's an old missile detection base from like Cold War era
Mm.
that is a pyramid, and it's just sitting out there. It costs like $7 billion in
Oh my God.
1971 money, and was open for three
Mm.
days, and then they shut it down. So it's just kind of
Why were they shut down? Do you know why they were shut down?
like it was I think that it was just cost too much, and they
It's unreal.
it's isn't it absurd?
It's
It's
absurd.
crazy.
It's absurd. Absurd.
And so I was just like seeing these images of just this bizarre brutalist structure out there in the middle of these farm fields that
Did
is
you
just
Was that your like was that a destination for you or did you have to
yeah. So it still is a destination for me. I didn't end up going there because I got to Texas and I was like, it's warm here. I don't want to. So I ended up going to Roswell, New Mexico instead, and took a
Okay.
lot of images out there.
Mm.
Uh,
Mm.
but yeah, no, I still need to go
Yeah.
to this pyramid. But like it got me thinking about, you know, these things, these artifacts and these structures that are going to be they're going to outlive me, everyone I know, and possibly civilization. And
Mm.
um, what and then what are people or beings or whatever that come after us going to make of these structures? You know,
Interesting.
what stories will they make up to explain its existence? And then just got me thinking about all the stories that we tell each other to explain existence and the absurdity
Mhm.
of it, you know?
Sounds a bit like science fiction the way you were kind
Yeah,
of
totally.
describing it there. Is that something that you think about?
All the time.
Yeah.
I love science fiction.
Yeah.
And you know, I love I'm a big you know, D&D player, and just I just love the idea of like an ancient civilization that is no longer around, and but like
Mm.
people still find things from it.
Mhm.
And think
And do you think that abstract photography, because it's such an interesting decision, and I think abstract photography is still pretty rare.
yeah.
Do you think that abstraction helps to better tell that almost like fictionalized story of our future?
Yeah, because I think so, because I think that you know, you're looking at this image, and obscured and partially kind of destroyed, and you can only really see glimpses of recognizable things. And I think it lends to sort of an air of mystery
Hmm.
about it.
Now, when you first introduced the project, you said that many of the images in the zine here were taken on this cross country trip.
Mhm.
Was your kind of, I guess, like imposition of abstraction and this idea of ancient civilizations, like was that your goal while you were traveling cross country, or did you have a goal to kind of objectively document your trip? Like most of us, right? Because if we go cross country, we want to take all the pictures and share all the
Yeah.
pictures, and
Yeah.
this is a
So I
very
mean,
interesting take.
I think the idea of like the sort of science fiction idea and artifacts was sort of like in the back of my mind, but I was also just documenting sort of what I saw, with the intention to obscure a lot of them. But then it sort of morphed into finding places of some kind of cultural significance, like Roswell, or I went to the Branch Davidian compound in Waco and took some pictures
Mhm.
there. And because I was on that particular trip, I was thinking about conspiracy theories and how those influence people and can make them do kind of crazy things,
Yeah, you could say
Yeah.
it.
um and it's just another kind of story,
Mhm.
you know
Yeah, one thing that I wanted to talk about in this is was your use of text and kind
yeah,
of language, like in between some of these pages. It's actually like handwritten on some kind of like vellum paper.
yeah,
So like here, actually, I think this is almost possibly what you were talking about. So you said, I went to Roswell instead, looking for proximity to the 1947, was that crash?
crash, yeah.
Crash.
Writing
Uh,
is
there were
not great.
little green men everywhere.
Sure. Yeah,
Yeah.
it was this funny thing, like every place has these sort of kitschy things that they have, like in Maine. It's there's moose sculptures and stuff like that.
Yeah.
But yeah, like every gas station I feel like had like
Oh, there were little green
sculpture
men.
of like a chainsaw sculpture of little green alien man, or like just they're just like the hotel I stayed in was like the sign had like an alien peeking out of UFO with a cup of coffee, and
Wait, so what is like the backstory behind? Wait, where was this? Roswell?
New
What
Mexico.
state? New Mexico? So
Mhm.
what is their obsession with aliens? Is there some story there
So
I'm not
yeah, I
aware
don't
of?
know. I mean, like, just I think that like there's just so much story there for me, and that sort of being the beginning of the conspiracy theories around that the government knows about aliens and all these things, but then also sort of leading into like thinking about like the Fermi paradox, and being like, are we alone? Because we could be.
Which paradox is this? Can you explain it?
The Fermi paradox.
I don't know what this is.
Uh and Enrico Fermi, he was a physicist, I think. But I think the story is that he him and his colleagues were once talking about extraterrestrial life, and everyone was talking about like, oh yeah, that it's definitely out there. And then Enrico Fermi posited back, well, where is everybody?
I'm curious if so okay, so there's this belief or this story held by some that aliens exist. Apparently it's a conversation that's had in this area of New
Mhm.
Mexico. Um, but I'm curious, maybe relating it back to photography, if you think photography plays a role in our believability of a situation or a story or a history or something like this.
Well, yeah, definitely. Because I mean, for a long time, you know, photography has been viewed as this impartial means of documentation, even though it's really not.
Agreed.
Um, but because it has a very strong mechanical function, right? People sort of believe that if it has been photographed, it is true. But, you know, it's not like cameras are just out there by themselves.
Yeah, yeah,
There's always a person behind it.
for sure. I'm curious how, like, what do you think the truth behind your abstract photos,
Mm.
like, yeah, I guess what could people read into it? Because there is very little, I mean, the narrative is abstracted so much that it's
Yeah.
mostly just color and shape and
Yeah, I mean, I think that is sort of I want people to see whatever they want, but I also want people to to th- to wonder how it was made. I
mm,
want to I want to I want to take I want to sort of take that away from the viewer and leave them in a mystery
mm,
that they can't really solve. It's sort of like um a magic trick or something like that,
mm,
like you almost don't want to know how. You almost don't want it explained. You just want it
mm,
to be.
mm. And do you feel like that's what was missing for you in like traditional photography? Because you said at the start of the conversation that you kind of, I don't know, if lost interest or it just wasn't doing it for you anymore. Do you think it has to do with that lack of mystery?
Yeah, kind of. I mean, a big part of this body of work is that I never know what's going to happen with these
Mm,
images. Like I don't know what image I'm doing what to, if that makes sense. Like that paperclip image that we were talking about before. I didn't know that it was that specific image that I was um had the paperclip on. And so the
oh,
results are always surprising.
oh.
And I really like that lack of control.
Interesting. Wait, so you didn't know what image, is it because you were kind of, were you working with the negatives, which is why
Mhm.
it was, I see, I see,
Yeah.
I see. So
So
these
this
are
is
all done in camera, like in camera
so
layering.
not images are made in camera, but then I take them home and then I have like these blackout curtains in my room, and then at night is when I shoot them. And I originally I was like keeping sticky notes
Cool.
on the film holders because I
Okay.
mostly use expired 4x5 slide.
Oh, very cool.
Um, and I was keeping sticky notes to know like what image, but then I don't know that got to be I it took away that element
Hmm.
of surprise and randomness that I was really
Hmm.
enjoying.
Do you ever feel like an attachment, like if you do take a photograph, especially the 4x5, because it's a special and unique process and an
Yeah.
expensive process oftentimes. Do you ever feel like, I don't know if I want to manipulate or touch this one? Like I want to
Yeah.
enjoy it for, or how do I want to phrase this? Like, yeah, appreciate it for what it is, for capturing this specific moment with this camera in this time in this place.
Yeah, sometimes I do.
Yeah.
And um but then I just wanna see like I find an object maybe on the scene of where I made this image, and then I take it back and I somehow interweave that into the laser process.
Mm, very cool.
And that it's and I lose I'd say about like 30% of the images. Like there's just
Hmm.
nothing.
Hmm.
And
Hmm. Hmm.
it's a bummer, but it's just kind of the process.
Yeah. I'm curious if there was like something in your life that kind of happened that maybe like inspired this, because it's a pretty drastic shift. I'm
Yeah.
gonna do another screen share maybe of some of your earlier, more traditionally photographic work. Let's see. What would be a good one to show? Hostel Valley, was that one more
Um, well,
traditional?
yeah, so I think of Hostel Valley as like sort of like
Oh,
a
that's an in between maybe.
yeah, as like an intermediary body.
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
think something more traditional, might be 90, 95, 12, or For the Love of Dolphins.
Okay. Yeah, 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 yeah. These are my
So this work, 90, 95, 12, I made when I lived in Idaho, around 2013 and 14. And it was me just wanting to explore this new place and photograph it. And you know, I went to this town called Lewiston, Idaho, which is very similar to a town called Lewiston, Maine, a mill town. And yeah. So I was just traveling around and just photographing these people and places and trying to get to know it that way.
Were
Um,
these with 4x5 also?
they
Looks like
were,
the
yeah,
proportions, yeah.
they were.
What was it like for you to photograph people in a new, like a place that you didn't know at such a, and sorry, listeners, apologies. So a 4x5 camera it's quite large, and it involves like putting a black cloak over your head so that you could see the image. The negatives themselves are 4 inches by 5 inches, which is very different from like the point and shoot 35 millimeter cameras where the negatives are, well, 35 millimeters. Um, so yeah, so it's a very cumbersome, heavy, non-discrete piece of equipment.
Yeah.
Yeah, what was it like for you to approach these strangers in a place you didn't know at such, yeah, with that equipment?
You know, so before I made this work, I did like a big 13,000 mile motorcycle trip around the country.
Oh, cool.
And also used a 4x5 camera. And
Wow.
it's basically, I don't know, like I think it's people are interested in this equipment that I'm lugging around,
Mm-hmm.
and I don't know, I just walk up to people that I find interesting and ask them if I can photograph them. And
That's so great.
yeah. And then, that process then starts, because it takes a while for me to set up and focus, and then
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
talk to the person, ask them how they're doing, where they're from, get to know them a little bit, so that when it actually comes time to take the picture, they're not uh they're not uneasy, or like,
Mm-hmm.
that sort of shield that a lot of people have when they're being photographed is sort of dropped, and I can get them to show me something a little deeper.
So we mentioned Hostile Valley briefly, kind of on our way to 90, 95, 12 project, but I'd like to return to it. Can you tell us a little bit about what's going on here? And I'm going to do a screen share again so that we could take a look at some of these images. Now you described this as kind of the in-between project between traditional photography and abstract photography.
Yeah, for sure. So when I got to grad school at Mass Art, I wanted to make something different, but I wasn't really sure how. And I was, sort of racking my brain, and then I started remembering, these stories that I heard uh, growing up in a small town in Maine, about 900 people. And these stories were like always pretty violent, like people, like a classmate of mine, like, accidentally set his brother on fire, and like,
Oh my gosh.
yeah, and like people like being buried alive for fun, or like,
This was in your small town these stories were from?
yeah, like generally around
Wow.
there. And just like
Okay.
hearing these like stories, and just, they were just kind of like in the background of growing up. And so I started remembering these, and I started asking people that I grew up with about some of these stories. Um, uh, if you move over one more, this
Mhm.
sort of light with the telephone pole.
Yeah.
Um, One of those stories is actually at this spot when I was in high school. My mom and I crashed into each other, like head-on collision,
Oh my gosh.
and totaled each other's cars. Pretty random
That's
and weird.
that's terrible.
Yeah, we were
But what
fine,
are the
but
chances?
I know, yeah, it's pretty small. It
Yeah.
was, it was the road,
Yeah.
the one road. Um, yeah, so
Not
I
to throw
started,
blame.
yeah, well, it was icy too. But yeah, so I started remembering these stories, um, and started wanting to not build them, not like recreate them in image, but I wanted to make images sort of inspired by the world that that the images that the stories sort of created, you know. And I was very influenced by the Robert Eggers movie The Witch, and uh just, you know, thinking about being a kid and the woods being all around me and not knowing what was out there, and you know, just the unknown. And then I started using a lot of because fire was such a big part of these stories, um but also sort of like of the town history. I started using a lot of pyrotechnics and, you know, materials that were used to like signal for help, like signal flares or things like that. And that, you know, I remember back in 1999, the town hall burnt down, and it was this big, huge, grand old building. And, you know, we saw this like big orange glow from in town. And we all went down there as a family. And then the whole village was there, sort of just watching these
Wow.
three apartments watch this whole town burn down. I mean, not the town, obviously, but this huge building burned down, you know. And it was a crazy thing. So, but I think if you go back to sort of the red images,
Am I going in the right direction?
yeah.
Yeah.
So these ones with like the sort of arc, I think that this is when I really started like thinking about how abstract I could make an image, you know,
Mm.
because this is just like a flare from a flare gun, you know, and just left the lens open, and it's at night, and it's probably like a minute long exposure,
Mm.
but because the flare is the only light there, um, that's what happens. And when I started making That Was Fun, um, I was thinking a lot about these images and thinking about how I could sort of do that without the flares, you know, sort of make those lines and become more abstract with it.
Yeah, and I think what's so interesting is that this, like in these images that we were just circulating through in Hostile Valley, you were still very much tied to the story or to
Yeah,
a story, and it seems like in your newer work, like there are hints of it, but it's not driven by narrative at all.
yeah.
I'm curious if eventually you'll get to the point where you don't need any any story. Like, is that a direction that you think you might end up, or do you still have like your roots in storytelling?
I think I'll always have my roots in some kind of storytelling. I'm a big fan of history, and you know, just learning about the the limits of human experience, you know, and just really especially seeing how history repeats itself again and again. So I think story is always going to be a factor, but how apparent that story is, I think will ebb and flow.
Thanks again for tuning in, everyone. We're just going to take a quick break here to make a few announcements. First, we're excited to announce that we are now on YouTube. So if you're listening to this episode on Spotify or Apple Podcasts or anything like this, and if you're curious to have some visuals of myself, my guests, and their work, head over to Art Uncovered Podcast on YouTube. Also, we are excited to announce that we are officially a 501c nonprofit platform. So if you'd like to ensure the continuation of this podcast, please donate. Any amount that you can contribute will be very much appreciated. You could donate on our website at artuncoveredpodcast.com. And that's it for today's announcement. We'll continue now with my conversation with Harlan Crichton. Yeah, I want to go back to a question that I started asking, then I kind of went off. But was there a moment, or did something happen in your life that kind of inspired this pretty
Yeah.
radical shift?
Yeah, I mean, it was definitely COVID sort of the lockdown started when I was in grad school at Mass
Oh,
Art, and I was
oh,
making
damn.
I was making Hostel Valley, and just like it was a very stressful time for me and everybody,
Mm-hmm.
you know. And it just got me worried about the future and
Was there any logistical reasons behind it? I mean, the fact that you couldn't really photograph strangers because we weren't supposed to leave
yeah,
our
yeah.
homes.
There was that too. There was that
Yeah,
too.
yeah,
It was,
yeah.
it was I wanted to just sort of see what I could do on my own. But like talking about process, like it was and sort of the frustration therein, like, I've been photographing in 4x5, getting the images processed and then scanning them and then dusting them forever and ever.
Mm-hmm.
And then holding myself to like a certain standard of a good image has to look like this, you know,
Oh, interesting. Okay.
and that I don't know, I was getting away and I really wanted to work with my hands. I wanted to touch the film and I wanted to like feel it and have some more tactile experiences with it, like being 14 in the darkroom and like um the original idea was that I wanted to make film less precious.
Hmm.
Um, but what ended up happening is I've made it infinitely more
Yeah.
because each one is a unique object, you know?
Yeah, 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 yeah. What, just listening to you talk there, I was wondering, you said that you wanted to have like a closer connection to the film, and I'm
Yeah.
wondering if, if this was all happening around the time of COVID, if it could have been um, symbolic or a result of you just yearning for human connection because we were all
Yeah.
so isolated at that time.
I
Yeah.
think so. Yeah. I mean, just have some kind of connection with people.
Yeah,
And
people, your work, I
yeah.
mean, yeah, we were all so isolated from all of it.
One thing that I
Yeah,
wanted to say
please.
the um about the text,
Yeah, 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 please.
the zine is that for each copy I bound that tracing paper in and then I wrote each one by hand
Mm-hmm.
so that they're all slightly different, by the what I was writing from the first one to the 20th one is different,
Oh, cool.
sort of how I'm saying I found different ways to write it, you know. So and that was a really interesting process. I've never done anything like that before, and
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
yeah.
Yeah, and that's so like anti-photography, right? Because we have
Yeah.
this like one
Yeah.
singular negative, and then we make multiple same thing over and over and over again. So it's kind of another form of, I don't know if resisting is the right word, but I'll use it anyway, like resisting the traditional ideas associated with photography.
Hmm. Definitely.
Very cool. Yeah, actually, there's something else I want to reflect on that you mentioned. Was this idea that you wanted to make photography, was it more or less precious?
I want to make it less precious.
Okay. Yeah, and I think that's really interesting that you chose a zine format for
Yeah.
these because, there's I mean, to me, zines are they're beautiful objects, but there's nothing really like white glove
Yeah.
nature of it. So I guess I'm curious if you could maybe chat a little bit more about your interest in the zine as an object.
Yeah. I think that they're just more playful,
Hmm.
and I can be more playful with them, and they're easier to produce. I printed that. I printed that was fun in my apartment, and bound it myself and cut it everything. They're easier for me to produce, and they're also more accessible to the viewer, right?
Hmm.
I can just charge less and I can make more, you know,
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
more copies as opposed to something that is more of a photo book.
Hmm. Do these photos exist like for the gallery setting also?
Yeah, they do. They
Yeah,
do.
very cool.
Some of them, quite a few of those that are in that zine. I've been experimenting with printing on transparency and building light boxes.
Cool. Oh, that's
Yeah,
fun.
which is really fun, and that's the whole deal, right?
Yeah, that's it. I'm getting
Yeah,
it.
it's because if you're not having fun making art, what are you doing?
Yeah. Right, 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 right.
Yeah, building light boxes. My dad and I, we built these light boxes, and I printed on transparency, had them mounted to plexi.
Oh, so nice.
It was, it's a really cool thing.
Yeah, yeah.
Just, they take up a lot of space. I have them, in my room now, but
Yeah. Yeah. Do you have any documentation of those?
yeah, I could send you those.
Okay, cool. Yeah, that sounds great. I'll include a like an image layover here so we can take a look at those. But that sounds great. So Harlan, in addition to photography and zines, and it sounds like your light boxes have a little bit of sculptural element to it. I also see on your website that you have experimented with video. And if I go over to the video tab on your website here, there's a project called March Ensemble.
Yeah.
It seems like this was a little bit collaborative, right? Like, what was March
Yeah. So
Ensemble?
So a friend of mine, she organizes this thing every March, where it's two artists every day of March, and they get a different prompt, and then they go make something from it, you know.
So
Um,
cool.
yeah, no, it's a really cool thing.
That's so cool.
Friend Mel does.
Is it all video or could it be
So
any?
so it can be anything. I
Okay.
always choose video because I don't know, I feel like it's more accessible to me to make in one day, you
Oh,
know.
okay. Okay.
So I get the prompt like the night before, and then go out and see if I can find something to make a video of.
Yeah, let's take this one as an example. So it's called "Grow Your Own Roses" at the historic, is that Babs Covered Bridge in Wyndham?
Hmm.
Yeah. So what was the prompt for this one?
The prompt was grow your own roses.
Grow your own roses. Very cool. And if I press play here, I'm not sure if you could hear it, but I'll dub over. So it looks like rain. Oh, sorry, that overlay. Rain in some body of water. Is it? Oh,
Hmm.
something
It's a
was thrown
river.
in the water. Okay. Yeah. So what's going on here? What was
Uh,
your thinking?
so with these videos, I always kind of try to make these like sort of moving photographs. I
Hmm.
don't have like a lot of video equipment. I just have my digital camera, and I usually try to find something that's sort of meditative that you can just stare at and look at for a long time. And there's not like any camera movement but there's just kind of a lot visually going on in the frame.
Hmm.
And it's sort of for whatever reason they're usually 3 minutes long, which is as long as a Super 8 reel would last, you know. Um,
It
but yeah,
seems
it's
like
just
there's a theme of landscape in
Mhm.
these.
For sure, for sure, yeah. They're I don't know, they're just an opportunity for me to have fun. Have
Yeah.
fun and just and do some exploring because like that's always something for me that draws me to making work is going out and finding something, exploring.
Mm.
It's hard for me to actually make an image around where I live. I always have to kind of go somewhere else,
Mm.
um, and find something.
Have you ever given yourself that challenge? Like you have to make something within the confines of your living room, for example.
Yeah, no, I haven't.
I kind
No,
of want to give you that prompt.
yeah, uh, I'll I'll take it. I'll do it. Um, but yeah, no. So for whatever reason, I think growing up in a small town in Maine,
Hmm.
um, I and wanting to see what else the world had to offer visually. I think
Oh
that's
man,
all.
so COVID must have been really tough for you if you have
Yeah.
an
Well,
urge.
I mean,
Yeah.
it's interesting because, during COVID, I was working for the census and I was going door to door
Wow.
asking people if they lived where they live. So that was a crazy thing. I mean, like, there's tons of stories from that, which was, I had so many people, so many anti-government people.
Wow.
I'm wearing a mask. Some people were very anti-mask.
It sounds
Yeah,
like an artwork in the making.
yeah. It was a wild time.
Yeah,
It was a
yeah, yeah,
wild time, incredibly interesting.
yeah,
But yeah.
yeah. Do you have any trips planned for like in the coming months or anything like this?
Yeah, I need to go actually photograph this pyramid that I was telling you about in North
Yeah,
Dakota. Like, I
yeah,
need to do that because it's been almost 3 years and I haven't been out there.
yeah.
So I think I'll make that less of a road trip and probably fly to somewhere out there and then rent a
Mm,
car.
very cool. Very
Yeah,
cool. Well, Harlan, thanks so much for chatting with us today.
yeah,
It
for
was
sure.
wonderful to meet you, and I love talking to photographers. My training is in photography, and it's just such a special medium. And you're tackling it in such an interesting way, like these ideas of fact versus fiction and the subjectivity of photography, which is, I feel like some of us are still, or some people, maybe not us, but some people are still very resistant to using it in a subjective way and still
Yeah,
view it as this objective medium of truth. So I love when I find artists that are kind of challenging that.
yeah. Thank you.
Yeah. Yeah. So thank you again. This was such a great chat.
Of course.
All right, everyone. That's all for this week. Please be sure to tune in next week as I will be speaking with Frankie Francis Cannon, an interdisciplinary artist, writer, educator, and editor who is the Mellon Science and Nature Writing Fellow at Kenyon College. Over the course of the conversation, we talk about Frankie's merging of art and writing, her visual book reviews, and her book, Walter Benjamin Reimagined, which was published by MIT Press. Hope to see some of you then. Have a great week. Bye-bye.